starting. This Hangout on air is live. So I guess we should do something like this.
Flight 209er, you're clear for takeoff.
Roger.
LA to 123.9er.
Roger. Less than
Hello, I'm Captain Jeff, and you're tuning in to the Airline Pilot Guy Feedback Extra Show. Joining me to help out with all this feedback is from Miami, Florida, Miami Rick.
Hey everybody! Glad to have you along with us on that on this extra episode for Feedback Extra
for people, extra special people like you watching right now. All right. And I see we're being rejoined by several. Hello, Tiffany. She's not going to hear me for about 25 to 30 seconds.
Okay.
I see Tiffany Walsh and Big Ron and Masha Geertz. And let's see, who else? Adam Asmar. All right. An 18-minute long Flight Chops video and an APG Hangout. Cool. I'll have to check out the Flight Chops video. And for those of you who are asking, I think Scott Richardson, is he back with us yet? He sent a tweet about how he can order an Airline Pilot Guy beer pint glass. I'll tell you what, I think that I've had so many people already inquire about that, Scott, that I'm not sure that my stock right now is such that I have enough for anybody who is requesting them now. And I'm still trying to sort through how I'm going to handle this in the future, because it takes so much of my time to package all these things up and do the labels and then do the invoices, to get some money for these things. And I think that I realized that this might be the job for a volunteer or two out there that can do this kind of thing for us, part of the APG community. If you're somebody out there who wants to volunteer to be our APG merchandise coordinator, that would be fantastic. Send your resumes to Jeff at airlinepilotguy.com. Okay, again, haven't thought through the whole process yet. I'm not sure exactly, how we're going to do that, but I barely have enough time to prepare these shows and try to answer all of your questions and fly airplanes for a living and then do all the other things I got to do around the house, along with the other things that I do in my life, like the other podcast that I do for the StarQuest Production Network and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, great to have all of you back with us in the chat room. And again, Rick, really didn't coordinate this with you until we were actually recording, but I hope it's okay for you to spend a little bit more time.
Absolutely happy to be here. You know that. Yeah,
I know that, but I can't tell if you're genuine or not. Just kidding. Okay. Let's continue. And by the way, if anybody watching the video or listening to the audio is a patron, don't freak out. I'm not going to charge anything for this episode. And for what that means to those of you who are not patrons, if you sign up to support the show via Patreon, you are kind of committing to give a certain amount per show, $1 a show, whatever, $5. And every one that I designate as a paid show, and it's generally 4 per month, sometimes 5, you are charged that amount. And then if you're thinking that I might go crazy and put out a show every single day, and you're thinking that you're going to become bankrupt by my content, don't worry, you can actually put a limit on your patronage to a maximum of a certain amount. Now, I do ask that if you're going to sign up at, let's say, the $5 per episode level, don't put your maximum monthly amount $5, because then that's kind of cheating the system, I think. That then if you don't want to pay anything more than $5 a month, then just designate $1 per episode. That way, see what I mean? It works out better that way. So if you want to learn more about the Airline Pilot Guy Coffee Fund or Patreon, my Patreon page is patreon.com/airlinepilotguy, or you can just go over to airlinepilotguy.com/coffee, and then you'll find out the different ways that you can help us out. Now, with that said, I think it is now time to continue with some feedback here. I think we're all the way up to Stuart, who sent this to us on the 24th of June, which is about couple weeks, 2.5, almost 3 weeks ago.
Mhm.
That's how far behind we are. And he says, Canada pilots X-rated chat broadcast. And he sent me a link to a bbc.co.uk article. And in it, I guess this happened in Winnipeg, Canada. A police helicopter, couple pilots were having a conversation that they were talking about something that is a rated mature or above. X-rated, probably the best way to put it. And dealing with and a lot of people are listening to this show with kids, so I'm not going to go into any more detail than that, other than to say that it was inappropriate conversation being broadcast by this police Air One helicopter, I guess on the PA system. So,
Oh man.
Brandy Armstrong told CBC News that she had been sitting in her garden on Monday evening as the helicopter flew over and was shocked by the exchange. She said, "My jaw hit the ground, eyes bulged out," she said. She added that she would like to see that the pilots be punished. The police say that they are considering disciplinary measures. So
I like the hashtag on the official tweet. Hashtag whoops.
So, we've talked about episodes on the show where people, like accidentally get a stuck mic and they're saying things that they probably shouldn't over the radio waves, but a limited number of people are actually listening to those. But if you're a police helicopter with one of those big giant PA loudspeaker kind of things, a lot of people are listening. And yeah, so how embarrassing. And they were swearing and they were discussing oral things.
Yeah.
So, okay. And you'll have to decide whether it's ORAL or AURAL. They're pronounced the same, but they mean different things.
I think it was AURL.
Oh yeah, that's got to be it. Okay. So let's move on, shall we, to something that's easier to talk about. And this is a cartoon that was sent to me by our listener, Tim Van Ram. And I'm going to share this so you can all look at it if you're watching the video. I know. People listening to the audio, we're just going to have to listen to my description of this. And that is it's a Dennis the Menace cartoon, and should be on the screen right now. And Dennis is saying, now I gotta find where okay. Dennis is out in looks like Mr. Wilson's front lawn, and in the front lawn is this thing that looks like it's something mounted on a pedestal, and many of us know that it is a what do they call these things? A
sundial?
Sundial. Thank you. I was going to say hourglass, but that's not what it is. It's a sundial. And then Dennis is pointing to this and saying, "Mr. Wilson is really going green." He says that this thing is solar powered. So,
We're going green. We're gonna take care of
Mr. Wilson, well, Mr. Van Ram knows that how much we are concerned about going green on this show. And so he saw this and couldn't resist sending it. So, of course, a sundial relies completely on the sun to indicate the time. So I know for you young kids out there, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about. And then many of you probably don't know what I'm talking about when I talk about this.
Potable.
Or
Potable.
that's better, I think.
Or potable.
Shut up. Larry says, couldn't resist sending it to you. Air Canada flight 1903 from Athens to Montreal had to be diverted to Dublin due to no
Potable.
water. Again, no
Potable.
water. And a lot of people would think, whoa, so what? You don't have any water. Well, it's something that we require to have on board the airplane, and that's one of the things that we check, or we should check on our pre-flight walk-arounds. And unless you're in an airplane like a fancy one like Rick has, probably he doesn't have to check the water level from outside the airplane. He probably has some kind of a fancy gauge on the inside of his airplane.
Yeah, as soon as you get on the airplane, you walk through the door, and then where the flight attendant's panel would be, and the door controls for the main deck door, and then the camera and all that stuff. Right underneath there's 3 gauges. One is the water level that we have to check for. The other one is the waste level. The water level for the potable water. The middle one is the waste level, and then the one all the way on the right is the cabin, the supernumerary area temperature gauge. Basically tells us how hot or how cold it is there. Yep. So it's fancy like that.
Fancy. Well, I have to go. Whoever's performing the walk around, open up a panel on the outside of the jet and turn on a switch and check the lights. We have like quarter tank, half tank, 3/4, and full, just to make sure we have the proper amount of water to on board the airplane before we take off. And generally speaking, most of the bases that we go to, that'll be an automatic thing by ramp workers to perform. Check the level of the water and then connect the hose and turn the spigot on and let the thing fill up. And then once it reaches a full position, then there's another tube, that kind of an overflow tube, where the water starts pouring out. And that's an indication that the airplane will take no more water.
Yeah, it's interesting that when you're doing this, another thing that we do, because we have to remember that us cargo pilots, we don't have a cabin crew to go through all the cabin checks for us. So what we do is we have to make sure that the water is flowing through, in the lavatory and then the coffee makers and all that kind of stuff. And the only way that we can actually test that is if the APU is on and the pneumatic pressure system is pressurized, because we need pneumatic pressure to pressurize the tanks to have that water flow. At least that's the way it works in my airplane. So if the APU is off, then we can't test or check if the water is flowing. So.
On my airplane, we have a little button, and this happens all the time. The flight attendants are trying to make coffee, and that requires pressure in the water system. And if we don't have our auxiliary power unit on, or at least there's not any residual pressure in the water tank there or remaining, you're not going to get anything out of the coffee maker as far as water, or the sinks in the lavatories. And so they go, hey, we need some water pressure. And then we usually ask, have you pushed the little button in the galley? And there's a little water compressor button that they can push. And it's kind of like the elevator. People push it several times, but it only requires one push, just like the elevator. Although psychologically, sometimes you think that you push the elevator down or up button more than once, it's going to somehow work better. But what this does is it actually activates a little tiny compressor pump, and it's it reminds me of, in fact, if you go back to about row 19 on the co-pilot side of the airplane, you'll hear this. It's a pretty good little imitation there, huh?
Yeah, spot on.
And it reminds me of I don't know if you have these in your cars or not, where you can get these little air pumps for pumping up your tire with air pressure.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Your cigarette lighter socket thing, that powered by the battery, and it just takes forever to get any pressure out of it to pump up the air in your tire. But that's I think that's exactly what it is on our airplane. That's back there when you push the button. And if you have if the water level is quite low, in other words, you have a lot of airspace in there, it's going to take a very long time for the water pressure to build up enough to start flowing again, because of, physics, volume, and all that kind of stuff. But as soon as we turn the auxiliary power unit on, and we're now tapping bleed air off of that little jet engine, it really rapidly fills that space, that airspace, with pressurized air, and it pushes the water out of the tank. Way more than you wanted to know about. Well, I don't have it up anymore. Potable water, but
hey, that's what you get when you listen to this show. More than you expect.
way more. And you know what? We don't charge any extra.
Nope.
That's one of those free, royalty-free sound effects that I got from YouTube, Google.
That was cool.
Yeah, I like that.
I couldn't see you because I have Dennis the Menace on here.
Oh, well, you know what? Thank you for mentioning that, because I need to go back and stop sharing that screen. See, I'm not a professional. At least I'm not a professional broadcaster. I need all the help I can get. Vladimir, anybody wants a cold beer? I'm going to the kitchen now. Yes, please. Thank you, Vlad.
I'll have one.
Is this controller Vlad? I bet it is. All right. I'm looking at the folks in our live chat room. I don't know if you could call it a chat room or not, but the people making comments on our live YouTube page. So thanks for hanging out with us today on this feedback extravaganza. Let's see. We have some audio feedback now from Abner. Every time I hear or see the word Abner, I think of Bewitched. That's Mrs. Kravitz, I think her name was.
I think so.
And her husband's name was Abner. Poor Abner. So Abner sent some audio feedback. Let's listen to what he has to say.
Hello, Captain Jeff. Hi, Aaliyah, Mike, and Dr. Steph. It's your gentleman, Boston Abner. I just had a question for Miami Rick. Yeah, I'll use his real name. Anyways, I know you fly for a large South American cargo company. So my question to you, Rick, is when flying that plane, who's responsible for the cargo? Now, I know the loadmaster signs off and the captain signs off on the manifest, but there could be boxes of thousands of things underneath. Could be shoes or whatever. Anything could be in there. I mean, you could sign off on 1,000 shoes. You don't actually know there's 1,000 pairs of shoes. So who's responsible for that stuff when it gets through customs? And, if there's something that's there that's not supposed to be there, I mean, I'm not saying anything bad about your cargo company, but it has happened in the past with routes from Miami to Haiti, Miami, Dominican Republic, and stuff like that, where people have been caught doing stuff. Like, who's responsible? Also, you guys don't go through normal customs, do you? You don't necessarily, you're not at a gate and you hop off the plane and you walk with the rest of the people through immigration, and then you walk do that to pick up your bags at customs. How does that work? Do they come to your plane like general aviation planes do when they come from the Bahamas or something like that, where they line up? You don't get out of your plane till somebody from CBP comes by, or immigration or customs, and tells you to get out, or walk into an area and checks all your stuff. So that's my question. And this comment here is for Captain Jeff. Captain Jeff, I know there's 3 postal workers that listen to your show continuously. That's probably about 20% of your listening base. Insert the drum roll here. David Abbey, Masha in the Netherlands, and myself. And just like to tell you, the U.S. Post Office will come by your house and pick up any package. You can print out those labels, even for customs and immigration, and it's easy. I think the shipping's actually cheaper online. I know you've been very busy, but it's one way to do it. Even international, I asked already, but yeah, I hope that goes well. I know you've been busy, so take care, and thank you for the great show. Have a good one.
Well, thank you, Abner. In fact, I've been using Click and Ship for, I don't know if they still call it that, but the U.S. Postal Service online mailing, shipping, label printing system for quite some time, actually. In fact, I used it for all the mugs and beer glasses and etc. For all the people out there. And Rick is one of those recipients. And that label there was printed from the U.S. Postal Service's online system. And Abner's right. There is a little bit of a discount for, not a huge one, but it's, the nice thing is convenience, so that I don't have to go to the post office and stand in line and then wait for them to put the label and postage and everything on. I can just go up to a certain area of our post office and put the boxes with the labels on them right there. Or, as he mentioned, you can also request a pickup from the post office, and I can just leave them out on my front porch, and then I don't even have to worry about going to the post office. So it's very convenient. Thank you for that commercial, Abner.
That is so convenient.
It is. And let's see, what did he?
Good questions. Good questions. Well, the first one, who's responsible for the cargo? Well, as you said,
oh, that's right, cargo. That's why I thought already about cargo. There's
the cargo. Who's responsible for that? Well, yeah, I mean, as on the operational side of things, obviously the flight crew is responsible for the cargo from point A to point B, and we're responsible with transporting that cargo. And the load master is responsible for loading it correctly in the correct sequence. But who's responsible of what's in it? That is a good question. I imagine. I mean, I don't have a definitive answer there for you, but I imagine that the company has some sort of contract with the shipper. And if something is not, completely kosher there, then I guess the company can go back to the shipper and hold them liable for, if for whatever reason, if there's something in there that shouldn't be in there, or I guess the company would cooperate with the authorities and I guess do their investigation to see who really is at fault and then proceed from there. I don't know. That is a good question, but I imagine that's the way it would work. If the flight crew is not held responsible if for some reason we happen to transport, let's say, let's just say that bluntly, illegal drugs, say from South America to up here, because we, obviously we didn't do it knowingly. We didn't know it was in there, and our job was just basically to fly the plane from point A to point B, which is what we did. Anything beyond that, really, I guess the company would have to deal with the shipper and the authorities to kind of figure out what the course of action would be. Well, I'm thinking that's the way, that situation would probably be handled. As far as the other questions that you had, which is obviously, also really good questions. At most airports, the cargo flights and cargo airplanes are parked at the cargo apron. We're not good enough to park among the shiny passenger jets. I'm just kidding. But basically,
I wouldn't want that.
No. There goes the neighborhood. Now, basically, the way it works is we will be when let's say let's talk about it like I'm arriving somewhere, basically here in Miami. So I come back, I fly back from wherever, we land in Miami, we park at the cargo apron, which is right by the office. And we obviously can't get off the airplane, go through the office and go back out because we haven't gone through immigration and customs yet. And we do go through immigration and customs, except when we get off the airplane, we'll get our luggage, which is usually, it can go one of two ways. We can actually send our luggage, with some ground personnel towards the back of the airplane and have the luggage go up in the bulk portion of the airplane all the way in the back. And so we'll have those guys come bring our bags, and they'll take them up to the van that's waiting for us at the bottom, at the foot of the stairs there. So they'll put the bags up in the van, or we can actually bring the bags down ourselves if we keep them in the main deck cargo area. That's one of two things we do, either in the bulk or in the main deck cargo area near the front of the plane. We'll bring the bags down, they'll put them in the van, then we'll get in the van, and then once you get off the airplane, you're not allowed to go back in, all right? So you get in the van, you'll take all your baggage with you, all that stuff. Make sure you don't leave your hat in there, because a lot of people always forget their hat. Put your hat on, get in the van, and then the van will take you to what's called GAC. That stands for General Aviation Center, which is a small immigration and custom office that's right next to the biggest fixed-based operator down here, the biggest FBO, which is where a lot of I'd say most of the private jets that fly in and out of MIA park. You'll see some really nice jets there. So basically you go in there, and then it's a small office. It's got 2 kiosks there. Mostly only one of them is usually manned by an officer. And then you'll go through there, you'll have your passport stamp, and then you'll go out that way. And then the hotel van will be waiting for you on the at the door there. So it's not like you have to go back to the terminal or anything like that. Now, what I usually do is after I go through GAC, I'll have my passport stamped and go through customs and all that stuff. I'll actually have the van that brought me from the airplane to GAC. I'll have that very same van drive me back to where the airplane is, because that's where the office is. And I usually leave my car parked at the office. So I'll have to go drive all the way back to where the airplane was, go through the office, go out to the parking lot, and then get in the car and leave. Basically, this is the way it works at most airports. There are certain airports, like, for example, Amsterdam. When we fly in and out of Amsterdam, we actually do get taken in a van from the airplane, to the airport terminal. And we go through the airport terminal there. We'll go through immigration where the rest of the passengers are. We'll go through customs where the rest of the passengers are. And then on the way back out, we'll go through the KLM Crew Center, which is where all the pilots for all the airlines that fly out of Schiphol happen to go through, because we won't actually go through security where passengers go through. We'll actually go through where the crews go through to actually expedite the process a little bit. So yeah, we do have our little, some airports where we have our little own, dedicated lane or dedicated procedures to get us to and from the airplane. So insert crickets here.
Well, I'm on a different screen, so you're just going to have to imagine the crickets playing in the background.
There you go.
Please do not send any more questions into the Airline Pilot Guy show. No.
I think that answered the questions, right?
I think so. I don't know. It's been so long ago. I don't remember what the question was anymore. So I think now it's time for me to play another one of these sound files. Let me see. Which one shall I pick? How about this one? All right. That one's called Blakey's Burnout, whatever that means. Okay, Chocolate Danish or Danish Roy sends in this link to a flyingmagazine.com article, a Cessna 172 Midair collision that happened close to his home this last weekend. What weekend would that be? Let's see. Let me see if I can find the date on this thing. I got to scroll way up here. It looks like the 25th of June or so when he sent this in. He said, which is about, Fort McMurray is about 5 hours from me. There's a video of the emergency crash landing of the airplane that survived the midair collision. And I'll have a link to this. It's very much worth watching. You'll see the Cessna, I guess it's a 172. Does 172 have floats? Huh.
There is some 172. Actually, we have a couple down here in Miami.
Anyway, it's kind of flying on. You can see that obviously the airplane had collided with something, and one of the floats is like, it doesn't look normal, and the thing is coming in for a landing, and then it's kind of a crash landing. So check it out if you'd like to see. Thank you, Danish, for that, I guess. Anthony sent this. He said, on episode 172, you discussed the fact that at least one regional cargo carrier was finding that new pilots lack something in the way of situational awareness and require further remedial training. You and Rick and Steph posited that this might arise from over-reliance on moving map displays and GPS-like capabilities. I have no real-life flight time. I've done much in the simulator world on both sides of the scope, pilot and controller. When learning to fly in that realm, I taught myself the old-fashioned hard way. NDB, VOR, chasing needles. I've tended to think of GPS and moving maps as something of a cheat in terms of situational awareness and being able to keep track of where you are. In the back of my mind, I suppose I've harbored this unconscious belief that real pilots don't need no stinking GPS. Yet this discussion was followed by your news item about the UK, where VORs are basically on the road to partial extinction. Granted, from what I can tell, there will still be some VORs in the UK, but the number will significantly decrease, such that a general aviation pilot in particular might well find large areas with no reachable VOR signal to work with. In this changing world, then, is it truly a necessary skill for an aspiring pilot to learn how to determine their location by cross-referencing two radial/DMEs? Maybe not. Yet, there is something disappointing in this. After all, there is something all the more satisfying about being able to pull off that mystic and miraculous feat of finding your way from point A to point B through the invisible road in the sky that only a pilot can see. If your passengers can see you just following the purple line, what skill is in there? What skill is there in that, Anthony? So it was kind of an opinion piece by Anthony regarding situational awareness and the purple line or the magenta line, children of the magenta, etc. Yeah, you make some good points there. If just like, Rick and I were not trained to use the what do they call that, radar range? I think the way back in the very early days of ground-based navigational aids, they would actually listen to tones, and then you had to determine what quadrant you were in if you tuned into a navigational aid, what quadrant you were in based on the sound or tones that you're listening to in your headset.
Man, that is way before my time.
Oh yeah, I mean, that was way before my time too, believe it or not.
I'm not saying anything.
And then, of course, the ADBs, the automatic directional beacons. I think that's what ADB stands for, and or NDB, non-directional beacons, where you would actually, track the needle, the head of the needle, or the tail of the needle to stay on the same bearing, and keep making adjustments to fly to an NDB. And that was kind of an advance from the range, whatever that was called, radar range. Some of you are probably going to say, no, the radar range was a microwave put out by Amana back in the 60s or something, 70s maybe. But anyway, whatever the thing was called.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the VOR, the VHF, very high frequency omnidirectional range.
Yep.
I believe is what VOR stands for. They came out, and of course they have actual, discrete radials that we could track, which is much more accurate. And now we're, as you said in the article, they're talking about decommissioning many of those because GPS systems and RNAV systems are, in such preponderance right now. So, yeah, I mean, I see your point. We're not trained on all that old technology anymore because it really doesn't exist, or very little of it's still out there. I mean, there are non-directional beacons still out there at various places, but we're not using them for our normal navigation routes. So, I don't know. Anything else to say about?
Yeah, I mean, it's and just like we said when we talked about this the first time around, it costs money to keep those maintained. So it's everything is about cost cutting nowadays, and saving money and this and that. So if you can, I mean, our airspace system here, at least in the United States, is relying every time more and more on the what's called the wide area augmentation system, or the or the GPS system there, and it's so reliable and it works so well that the VORs eventually are going to go the way of the Dodo, because they're just not going to be necessary anymore. So
yeah, but
that doesn't mean that you can't have good situational awareness without them. Because situational awareness is knowing where you are right now, where you've been, and where you're going to, based on your surroundings. So you don't really need, VORs and NDBs to figure that out. It's just basically making sure that you know what your position looks like, compared to space in your mind. That's what SA really is. So regardless of what method you're using.
Yeah, and honestly, if you're in radar contact and you're talking to somebody on the radio and you lose your fancy pants navigation system, you're just going to ask them for vectors anyway, right?
Yep.
So, yeah, a lot of good points made. Thank you, Anthony, for that. All right. Indiana Tommy writes in, let me start off by saying that your podcast puts me to sleep. That's not very nice. Don't worry. I mean that in a really good way, he says. Since I am a fairly new listener, I've been trying to catch up on all the podcasts that I have had no free time during the day to listen to. So often I spend many of my nights listening to you before I go to bed. I'm usually very good at sticking it out until the end of the episode, but sometimes I'm just too exhausted to stay up. On occasion, I will wake up in the middle of the night with my earbuds still in my ears and your voice still playing in my head. I apologize for that. I've never given feedback, so let me introduce myself. My name is Tommy. I'm 17 years old. I guess you can call me Indiana Tommy because that's where I'm from. My home airport is SBN, which is South Bend, which is right next to the University of Notre Dame. I hope to one day work in the aviation field, but more on the business side of things. Even though I don't feel called to the profession of a pilot, I'm still fascinated by your work up in the clouds. Your podcast provides endless insights into the wonderful world of aviation, so please keep up the good work. I'm writing you to provide specific feedback about that boring guy named Miami Rick. About time somebody said something about this. Just kidding. Miami Rick, I think you're full of knowledge and add an awesome dynamic to the show. My suggestion gets its inspiration from Miami Rick's nickname, Rickopedia. Sometimes you, Captain Jeff, see the need to throw in some cricket noises whenever Rick goes on too long about something. Well, you see, I don't think you should just call them crickets, but rather rickets. The new name, Rickets, will make Miami Rick feel special even when he is being made fun of. Okay, we'll do that. They are now, hence, from this point forward, called Rickets. The new name, let's see. I find it cool that you're also a fellow Catholic as well. I'm sorry about your mother, but please know that I lit a candle and said a prayer for your family and for your mom in the grotto of Notre Dame. Oh, thank you. That's nice. If you ever have some free time this fall, come up for some Notre Dame football. You have a football team up there? Huh. I'll give you a tour of the school and show you all the city of South Bend favorites. All right. Well, thank you, Tommy, for your feedback and your suggestion for the rechristening of crickets, now called Rickets. What do you think about that, Miami Rick?
Oh man, I'm gonna unleash an army of rickets upon the APG community. So stand by.
Rickets does mean something. What are rickets actually? That is something, isn't it?
I believe I've heard that word before actually, and I'm sure somebody's talking about it in the chat room here.
Let's see. Rickets are a disease of children caused by a vitamin D deficiency, characterized by imperfect calcification, softening, and distortion of the bones, typically resulting in bowed legs or bow legs.
Huh. Okay.
Thought I remember hearing that term used at some point. All right. Well, we have our new definition.
There you go.
All right. Grant left some voice feedback. Let's see what he has to say.
Hey, Captain Jeff and Miami Rick. This is Grant from Atlanta. Was actually calling with a quick question. I had an experience a couple years ago on board a flight prior to becoming such a informed air traveler due to your fine podcast. But I was on a 767 from DFW to Madrid after 30, 45 minutes over the Atlantic. And unfortunately, after I had already gone to sleep, the pilot came on to let us know that, quote, there was something wrong with the plane, and a part that they needed to cross the Atlantic was no longer functioning, and they would have to turn back. We landed in JFK without too much fuss. We didn't have full emergency crew chasing us down the runway. I'm curious, what things do you hypothesize could have been the issue in this flight? I know, Captain Jeff, you talked about constantly keeping the passengers informed. This was a wonderful example of, I think, what not to do. Love the podcast and can't wait for many, many more episodes.
Yeah, some people would argue and say, you know what, you probably didn't need to go into that much detail about whatever part it was that was broken, but perhaps in Grant's situation, maybe a little bit more information would have kind of allayed a lot of the, the suspicions and whatever fears or whatever.
Yeah, a little bit of information goes a long way.
So what do you suppose would have been the part that they needed to continue over the Atlantic?
Well, I'm thinking here. Be careful. Anyway, I'm thinking here. Well, before we go on to that, this is there go the rickets. Before we go on to that, whenever a twin-engine airplane is going to do an Atlantic crossing, that means that the airplane is, depending on the route, it's going to be at least 2 hours or up to 3 hours away from a suitable airport. And a suitable airport basically is an appropriate airport, which has the instrument procedures, the terminal facilities, the emergency equipment, and what makes it a suitable airport is that it has all those things plus the weather required for that airplane to operate into that airport. So you're going to be at least 2 or 3 hours away from that. So in the dispatch portion of the flight, you got to make sure that you have certain systems and certain backup systems in line for the airplane to be legal to make that long trek across the ocean. There's many things here. There are a number of hydraulic pumps required for that. There is a number of electrical generators required for that. There's a number of high-frequency radios, HF radios required for that. You need to have 2 of those. If one fails, then you're restricted to 120 minutes, 120-minute ETOPS, or 2 hours away from a suitable airport. So these are things that need to be working before you take off. Now, it could have happened that these guys were starting their crossing and they had some sort of electrical generator failure, or one of the radios stopped working, one of the HF radios stopped working. And another thing I was thinking about here is this was DFW to Madrid, so this was most likely an AA flight. And their 767s, some 767s have on their fuel panel, they have 2 crossfeed valves, and others only have 1 crossfeed valve. I believe the older models have only 1 crossfeed valve. And on the 767s that I used to fly that only had 1 crossfeed valve, there was a check that you had to do before entering what's called the ETOPS portion of the flight, which is the point that's going to keep you more than an hour away from a suitable airport. And what you were supposed to do there was recycle the crossfeed valve 1 time. So you had to press it and let the button go, make sure that the crossfeed valve opened. And then once it opened, press it again to make sure the crossfeed valve closed. Now, if the crossfeed valve got stuck, then you weren't allowed to continue the flight across the Atlantic. So if any of these systems fail, any of the systems that are required for you to be able to do a long distance flight over water away from suitable airports, then you have to go ahead and turn back because you're not legal to do it anymore. Because if in the eventuality that something does happen, you wouldn't have that backup system available to you. So why chance it? Just go back and turn around. So it can be a number of things.
Yeah, and there's no way of knowing with the little information that we have from Grant's story. And yeah, it would have been nice again if they had said our communication, availability, or what's the word I'm looking for? Communication, whatever. Something, a little bit more than just something's broken, we got to go back.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would have been helpful. Capability, that's the word I was looking for.
There you go.
Okay. Thank you, brain, for failing me once again. All right. Thank you, Grant, for your feedback. Hope that answered your question. And let's see. I don't know if you I think, Rick, you did see this. We talked about this when it came in a while back. Larry Gregory in Tulsa sent a link to this. It was a video on a Facebook page. He says, I'm not sure which parts of the FARs this would violate, but it certainly does get your attention. And I think it's a video from some Asian country. I'll have a link in the show notes, where there is this, they're lighting up like homemade rockets that are arranged in this ring device. And I guess they're arranged to propel in a certain sequence. And this thing looks like like an ancient flying saucer, something you'd probably see in a Indiana Jones movie or something. I don't know, but it goes flying way up high. So it is, I don't know. Yeah, I guess it's an unmanned aerospace vehicle, sort of. So, but it's really interesting. It makes a lot of noise, and people are yelling in the video quite a bit. So, whatever it was very exciting to watch, both in person and also via video. So, look for that link in the show notes. Thank you, Larry. Jeff in Minneapolis writes, one of my favorite podcasts, other than the APG, of course, is the show 99% Invisible, which is abbreviated 99PI, described as a radio show about design, architecture, and the 99% invisible activity that shapes our world. 99PI covers fascinating topics most of us take for granted, such as the history of the elevator, highway sign design, a failed attempt to turn Dallas, Texas, yes, Dallas, into a seaport. Well, unusual one. And the odd carpet at Portland International Airport. If you've not listened to this podcast, I highly recommend it. Okay, I'll have to listen to it. I mentioned 99PI because this week's episode was the first in a multi-part series on the automation paradox, and I did listen to this episode. That is the downward interaction between automation and automation dependence. To kick off the series, 99PI covered the crash of Air France 447. The show gives a brief history of Airbus and explains its philosophy toward cockpit automation. Who knew that Bernard Ziegler, a senior Airbus engineer, designed the A300's flight system so that even his concierge could fly it? I was excited to find this episode because I think automation dependence is an important topic that might not be appreciated by non-aviation enthusiasts. 99% Invisible is a popular general interest show that reaches a broad audience, though it might be slightly skewed towards young West Coast hipsters who like to bring up random facts at cocktail parties. I don't think that applies to any of us. The show does an excellent job of explaining aircraft design and flight maneuvers in a language that non-pilots can understand. Please check it out. Tell us what you think. I did. That's, again, Jeff in Minneapolis. I did check it out. I'll have a link to the episode about automation and automation dependence. And guess what they've entitled the particular episode? Children of the Magenta Automation Paradox, Part 1. And I only listened to Part 1, so I'm sure by now they probably have Part 2 and more out. So definitely check out 99PI, a link in the show notes regarding that. So thank you, Jeff, for that advice. Now, you know what? What I should do here probably is play another one of these things like this one, which I've already done, but I'm doing it again because I like it.
I like that one too.
Okay, so I wish that I'd never brought this subject up because I don't think I've ever, it's my fault because I don't think I ever communicated exactly the question properly that I was trying to figure out, or the question that was posed to me by my first officer years and years ago. And it has to do with the fact that, we have centerline markings, the stripes in the center of the runway. And then we have centerline lighting on some of the precision runways that we use. And the precision centerline, or the centerline lighting, is offset from the actual center of the runway by a certain amount. And many of you have given me documents that tell me how many feet it can be offset to the right or left and blah, 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 blah. And that was not my question. And then I think, well, Larry, I'm not sure if Larry's being tongue in cheek here or not. But let's listen to Larry here.
Hey, Captain Jeff and Miami Rick. This is Larry from Tulsa. Just listening to episode 173, the part about my sending you the advisory circular on the centerline lighting being offset to one side or the other. I didn't spell it out, but implied was if it tells you how much to offset it to one side, if it's on the right side, let's say you're on runway 18 and it's offset to the right, you know, if you go down to the other end and turn around and come back on runway 36, it's going to be offset to the left. So I guess the answer is it depends on which way you're going. Good. Thank you.
Okay, Larry, I really do understand that.
Wait. I'm still taking notes here.
So,
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. So here, let me try to. I'm not sure. You know, maybe the guy that asked the question, maybe he just posed the question because he knew that there wasn't really any kind of an answer. I don't know, but I understand that. And Seattle area Josh said, hey, well, you know, it makes sense that they wouldn't actually have the lights lined up with the actual center line markings because then it would be harder to paint around the lights, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I get that. I know that the lights and the center line markings are not going to be exactly aligned. And I know there's a certain distance, a maximum that they can do. And Larry, yes, I understand that if you're flying 1/8 and they're on the right side, let's say, of the center line markings, that when you go to the other end of the runway, they're going to be on the left. I get that. I'm not a complete idiot, almost, but not completely. The question that was posed to me was, how do you know? I guess he was implying that it depends on let's say the magnetic bearing or the magnetic heading of the runway. So if the magnetic bearing is from 091 through 269, then the centerline lights are offset to the south of it. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
Yeah, I hear it. Kind of like the cruise levels. You know, from 0 to 179 is odd, from 180 to 359 is even, stuff like that. Yeah.
Right. And what is it? You know, why is that important? Well, it's not. It's just this trivial information that a lot of us enjoy knowing for some strange reason. And so apparently, I wish that I'd asked this person, no, what is the rule regarding that? But he never told me. And I really regret now that I ever asked the APG community to help me with this, because apparently nobody knows. But
I have no idea. I'm drawing a blank here.
You know what? At this point, I really don't care anymore. So, but I do thank everybody for trying or attempting to enlighten me about this. But you know what? Nobody came up with the answer. And I suspect there probably isn't one. Maybe it's just an arbitrary decision that they offset one way or another. And this person was just yanking my chain and making me just go nuts, trying to figure it out. Okay, so let's move on with a communication question. Hi, Captain Jeff and Miami Rick, or if it's Miami Mike, that works too, possibly the good Doc. I was flying, I'm a Cessna 182. Okay, I was flying in a Cessna 182 a while ago as a passenger behind the pilot. I heard a call from ATC reporting traffic in the area, and I immediately began a scan for the traffic and found it before anyone else. Unfortunately, my headset would not transmit. I could hear but not talk, so I got the co-pilot's attention and did my best to convey that I had the traffic in sight and where it was. It was our 7 o'clock position, about 2,000 feet below, going away. My question for you, is there any procedure if something similar happens in your cockpit? I mean, how would you best convey positions of traffic? And that's Ryan from Wisconsin. And he says, if you're ever up in the Milwaukee area, let him know, because the first drink is on me. Or if it's at EAA Air Venture, that works too. So, hey, Rick is going to be there. Tyler is going to be there. Probably many others from the APG community up there. So, Ryan, check out, look for Rick and Tyler. They'll be walking around. I'm sure you'll be able to find them since they're only going to be probably a couple 100,000 people up there.
Yeah, I'll be chewing gum with my Acme T-shirt.
There you go, and your VKX hat.
And my VKX hat, absolutely.
Okay. So is there a way or a best way to convey traffic? And I mean, I'm just off the top of my head. If we're pointing, we usually if we see the traffic, and we usually point at it. But of course, depending on where you're sitting, the perspective is going to change from where you're pointing and where this person is going to be looking. And or alternatively, you can say, looks like about 2 o'clock or 2:30, 2 to 3 o'clock or whatever. Low, below the horizon line, above the horizon line, whatever. And sometimes, no matter how hard you try to convey where the traffic is, it's just the other person goes, I don't see it. And that has a lot to do with the fact that your focus, your focal length, I guess, in your eyeballs is not set properly. So sometimes, the traffic, if your eyeballs are focused properly, you can see it immediately. And then other times is like you can stare out there forever and never see it.
It's funny because you mentioned that, because if there is an airway or a piece of airspace that has a lot of traffic flying through it, is right over Panama, where the Panama Canal is, because there's a bunch of airways that kind of converge over that spot there, and there's always airplanes flying one way and the other. And I always think about the fact that if I was a fighter pilot, man, I would have died a long time ago, because during the daytime, especially under some light conditions, it's really hard to see other airplanes out there. Really, really hard. Conversely, at night, I can see airplanes forever. I mean, I can see them sometimes for I'm not, 50, 60, 70 miles away.
Like a dark sky and the light, just that little tiny light is enough. Or if you're flying on a day where we're putting out the chemtrails, I mean the contrails.
Don't talk about that, man.
Sorry, my bad. So that really makes it easy to pick out an airplane, because you can see the contrail coming out of the back of it. But
exactly.
Have you done this, Rick, where you somebody's telling you where to look and everything else, and then after a while you just kind of go, oh, okay, yeah, I got it.
All the time.
Because you're embarrassed because you really have.
I'm like, oh, yeah, right there. And usually what I did, well, the thing is,
I didn't see that.
Usually what we have on our navigation displays, and other airplanes have the TCAS scope, or the fish scope, right on the vertical speed indicator. Depends on the kind of airplane. But the one I fly on the big navigation display, we actually get traffic targets, and the way those work is you have a little you have a piece of equipment called a transponder. You set in a code in there, and then that transponder, your airplane transponder, is going to interrogate another airplane's transponder, and that airplane transponder is going to talk back to yours, and that's going to basically figure out a bearing and a distance and an altitude compared to where you are. So you can actually see that information displayed on your screen. So you basically will look down there at your screen, and then you look out the window and try to see if you actually see the airplane physically. And like just Captain Jeff said right now, sometimes a guy will be like, he's right there, you see him. And what I'll do is I'll be wearing my sunglasses. I'll look down towards the screen there to make sure that the airplane's moving where it's supposed to be moving. And I'll kind of move my head, kind of tracking like the airplane was passing next to me. And I go, oh yeah, there it goes. There it is. But I never saw the thing.
I know. It's like, it's pride. We pilots are proud people, proud folk.
We're a prideful bunch.
Yes, we are. And that can bite us in the butt sometimes. I don't know if Scott Richardson is still in the chat room, but there's a piece of feedback that he sent in we're going to get to soon. And so hang around, Scott. This one, is from Juan Ruiz. Is that the way you pronounce your last name?
Ruiz, yeah.
Ruiz, okay. Not Ruiz?
I've always heard it as Ruiz.
Okay. Well, Juan is Miami Mike's long-lost nephew, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, he's in the family somewhere. I don't know.
Sure. He said, hello, Captain Jeff, Dr. Steph, Miami Rick. I gave some feedback a few weeks ago regarding my prep for my first simulated flight on the 777. I made a short flight from Amsterdam to Basel, Switzerland, using the freighter version of the 777, and was amazed on how smooth the plane flies. I hand flew most of the departure and the approach, and with that fly-by-wire system, it was not that difficult. I had a small problem though during my climb, and way after I put the gear up, I received a warning on the EICAS, EICAS brake temp. One of the brakes on the left main landing gear was a bit hot, so I followed the checklist, which requires lowering the gear and waiting around 8 minutes. I interrupted the climb, slowed down, and after the warning went away, I pulled the gear up and continued with the flight. My question for Rick is, would this be likely to happen in a real 777? I mean, having a high brake temperature after the landing gear has been retracted? Or would it be a fault with the simulation software I'm using?
Well, it depends. I mean, all right. So basically, the way this thing works is, and the flight crew training manual, the FCTM for the airplane says that the brake technique and the taxi technique, basically, you're supposed to let the airplane use as little brake away power as possible. Just move the throttles as little as possible to get the airplane rolling, and then once that happens, close them back down, and then have the airplane start gathering momentum and inertia, and let the airplane accelerate to anywhere between 20 to 30 knots on really long straightaways. And then once you get to that airspeed, not that airspeed, ground speed, step on the brakes, one constant press until you get the speed below 10 again, and then have the airplane roll back up to 20 to 30 knots ground speed. That way, the way you're doing, the thing you're doing that way is you are reducing the number of brake applications, and then reducing the amount of wear on the brakes and the amount of heat that the brakes build up, because you have to remember that these are carbon brakes, and then the brakes, the number of brake applications that you actually put on the brakes, they're cumulative. So the heat's going to start building up. The cool thing about the 777 brake system is that while on the ground and at taxi speeds of less than 45 knots, every time you step on the brakes, only two parallel sets of wheels are going to be applying brakes. One pair is released. So you're not actually applying brakes with all 6 wheels every time. So you'll step on the brakes, only 4 pairs of wheels will work, and then you let go. You step on the brakes again, another 4 sets of wheels are going to apply the brakes. So there's always a pair of wheels that are not being braked, just because you're trying to reduce brake wear and reduce the heat on the buildup on the brakes. Now, there was an accident many years ago. I believe this was a Caravelle in Zurich in Switzerland, and it was one day that it was really foggy outside, and then the pilots thought it'd be a good idea to taxi down the runway with close to full power with the brakes on. I don't know if you heard about this one, Captain Jeff. Mm-hmm. They got to the end of the runway, turned back around, took off, and then the brakes caught on fire. They brought the landing gear up, and then it wasn't a happy ending. No. So this is certainly something that could happen. Another thing to keep in mind here is how long did you wait from the time you landed until the time you took back off again? Because you need to wait for the brakes to cool for you to be able to do another takeoff. Not because the brakes might get hot during the climb out, but more importantly, because if the brakes are hot and you have to reject your takeoff because of any kind of failure, if the brakes are hot, they're not as effective. So you really need cool brakes for that. And just like you did here, you did the correct checklist. You're supposed to slow the airplane down to below 270 knots, bring the gear down, fly that way for a couple of minutes. The problem with that is that you have to take into account air traffic control restrictions, and they're probably not going to like you flying around at low altitude below 270 knots, holding everyone up, because that is very busy airspace between the Netherlands and Switzerland. So yeah, they wouldn't be too happy. They'd probably have you turn back around and land. So that's what I got on brakes there. It's a good question, though. Really good question. It's something that could happen if you let it happen. But if you operate the airplane the way you're supposed to, and you give yourself time between your last landing and your next takeoff, then it shouldn't happen. And remember, as soon as you get the call from the mechanic downstairs that the chocks are in place, release the parking brake, because that's the easiest and the best and the fastest way for brakes to cool, with the parking brake off.
Now, a characteristic of brakes and I guess physics is that the way when brakes get heated, the peak temperature doesn't occur until several minutes after you've applied the brakes and they've dispersed that energy or absorbed that energy. And that was something that we had to worry about a lot when we were flying the L-1011 in Hawaii, heading back from Hawaii to either Atlanta or San Francisco or Dallas. So we had a very, very heavy airplane loaded with passengers, loaded with fuel. And even if you weren't touching the brakes, just the friction of the wheels rotating under that very, very high weight was enough to get everything heated up, and that of course applied to the brakes as well. So you had to be very careful about your brake applications, and you had to keep your eye on the brake temperatures.
It's interesting. Not only the brakes get hot, but the tires get hot as well.
Yeah.
And you could actually have the airplane tires have these things in them called fusible plugs, which are these plugs that are basically in the rim of the tire that are made from a metal that would melt at a certain temperature. So if the brake assembly or the tire itself gets to that temperature, then that metal is going to melt and let all the pressurized nitrogen out of the tire and basically deflate your tires to protect to keep the tire from blowing up. Because imagine what would happen if a tire that's pressurized to 300 and something PSI full of nitrogen blows up. That would not be pretty either. So you have to be mindful of your brake temperatures, and you have to be mindful of your tire temperatures. And just like Captain Jeff said here, usually from your last brake application till you actually get an accurate reading on your brake temperature monitoring equipment of what the actual brake temperature is usually about 15 minutes. So you got to wait about 15 minutes for that reading to peak out and let you know how hot your brakes really are.
Right. And we talked about on earlier shows where the Airbuses, the narrow-bodied Airbuses, can sometimes have the same kind of problem with brake temperature or brake overheat. And the fact that they're using carbon brakes, and Rick talked about at the beginning of answering this question about the proper technique for using brakes that are carbon fiber brakes or carbon brakes. So yeah, good question, and it's not unusual. In fact, some of these narrow-body Airbus airplanes, as an option, can be equipped with brake fans.
Yeah, brake fans
on the ground, as they're taxiing out to keep the brake temperatures down. So, but because of the fact that, as Rick just mentioned, that the peak temperature doesn't occur for 15 minutes after the last application, it's not unusual to see a high brake temperature enunciation after you've taken off and the landing gear's up and all that kind of stuff. So, great question. He goes on to say, I would also like to support the initiative of the APG meetup at Farnborough Air Show in England next year. I think it's a great way for those of us who live here in Europe to meet you guys. All right, so thank you, Juan, for that. He must be in maybe Spain or something. Didn't say. Adam writes, my question for you all today is in regards to relaying an emergency. I operate out of a non-towered satellite Class D airport. This puts me in the unique situation where I must utilize both the Common Traffic Advisory Frequency, or we call it CTAF, as well as the tower frequency for the airspace. So when I was on the ground doing my run-up this past Saturday, I heard an aircraft initiate a distress call on the CTAF frequency. Although he wasn't at the airport I was at, the CTAF frequency for the airport he was attempting to make his emergency landing shares the frequency the same as my airport. He stated his plane was indicating 0 oil pressure and he was expecting his engine to quit any minute. I then queried his situation further and asked him if he was transmitting on guard 121.5 megahertz. He said he wasn't, as he was too busy flying his plane. The rest of the situation plays out after I took off and informed the control tower of the emergency. Rather than explain that part, I've attached the condensed audio of the encounter I had with the tower. So let's listen to this.
This is the hour Cessna 19947 off of Air Park with Bravo will be remaining close traffic at Airport.
19947 Addison Tower, remain east max 10 center line at all times, Addison Tower.
Altimeter 3003, departing traffic, runway 33, straight out runway heading. Main Houston will be looking for the traffic, and we were listening to the CTAF here, and we heard an emergency call for Lane Airport, I believe. He said it was a grass strip north of Dallas. He said his engine oil pressure was running. He was making an emergency landing, so I just wanted to let you know. 49947, where are they landing at? I couldn't understand him fully, but I believe he said Lane. I'm not familiar with that strip, but he said it was a grass strip north of Dallas. 947, what frequency did you hear this on? 122.9er. Is that Air Park's frequency? Yeah, affirmative. That's Air Park CTAF and a bunch of other CTAF. And he said a grass strip by Lane Street. Is that what you said? He said Lane traffic, and he said that's north Dallas. But I was picking him up on the ground here, so I had pretty good reception, but I'm just not familiar with that strip. Roger.
Obviously, he's not familiar.
4791 Victor, Addison ground, runway 33, taxi Alpha. Alright, Tango, kind of regional departure. Regional departure 124.30 at Tango. And Tower 9047, he said he could not find the strip at Lane, and he's going to Gainesville, and he's too busy to talk on guard. 947, well, tell him to change to 124.3 and contact them. He needs to be talking to somebody else, not just talking to you. I'll let him know, 947. Niner 47, Addison ground, or Addison Tower. 947. 947, did you give him that frequency? Did he say he was going to call him? I couldn't reach him again. He said he was going to Gainesville CTAF. Roger.
Okay, so that's the audio. After I landed, I called the airport manager of the airport. The person said he was diverting to, at the airport that the person said he was diverting to, and informed them of the situation. I also called and informed the local flight service station as well. Unfortunately, I was unable to gather more information from this person, such as a tail number, etc., as I was too busy flying my own airplane. So far, I haven't read of any incidents in the local area, so I assume he made it to the ground just fine. So my question for you all is, how and to whom would you relay an emergency that you heard on guard, or any other frequency for that matter? And have you all ever had to relay an emergency before? Soon-to-be private pilot Adam from Dallas, Texas. Check ride on July 15th, which is in 5 days. Awesome. Yes, Captain Jeff would love to meet up with you on your next DFW layover. Okay. So thank you very much, Adam, for kind of relating this situation that you had. And I think you did everything that you could have. And you could tell that the air traffic controller was somewhat irritated, but you were doing the best that you could with the information that you had. I don't know what else you could have done. And I don't know, Rick, what would you say about this? Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm thinking, along your lines here. I really don't know what else he could have done. I mean, he relayed the message. What else can he do?
Yeah. Now, maybe this person should have, instead of staying on the CTAF frequency. I mean, I don't know how difficult it would be if you're undergoing a situation as he was with low oil pressure, et cetera, to just quickly move the frequency to 121.5, and at least you're transmitting on a frequency that everybody, or most everybody, is monitoring. That would have helped, but sounds like this guy may have had his hands full and was doing everything he could to just fly the airplane, which I think sometimes perhaps some air traffic controllers that don't have any experience themselves with flying airplanes, especially airplanes that are undergoing an emergency situation, aren't familiar with. So your question for us is, to how and to whom would you relay an emergency that you heard on guard or any other frequency for that matter. We do it just like you did. Say, hey, heard this guy on another frequency. He's having a problem. I think this is where he said he was going. And, at least you're alerting people that something's going on. And I don't know, how else I would have handled that situation. And have
I've talked to, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I've talked about how when I'm well, as we cruise in airliners, we're always monitoring the guard frequency 121.5. And if I happen to hear an ELT go off, then I'll go down to my FMC and then note down the coordinates where I heard that signal and relay that to ATC. So I mean, you do what you can to help out. Absolutely.
Yeah, and have I ever been involved with relaying somebody's emergency situation? I've been on frequency when other people have helped out somebody that was in distress and communicated that to the air traffic control frequency that we were on. And in those cases where you would love to be helpful in that regard as well, if somebody else has already kind of initiated that connection between the distressed aircraft and air traffic control, then you just kind of want to sit back and let them do their thing because you don't want to confuse the situation at all. But I have heard several times, and some of them actually over the open waters of the Atlantic or Pacific Oceans, where people were having trouble and they were out of radio range and kind of used another flight to relay their information to the controlling authorities.
Absolutely.
So it's part of what we do to help each other out, because we're all, a brotherhood of aviators out there, and we all want the best for everyone. So with that said, pressing the button and nothing is happening. Okay, CJ, the C-130 pilot, writes, my unit just canceled all flying for the day. This was back on the 29th of June because we'd had a rash of small safety incidents over the past 2 weeks. We talked about what went wrong and things to do to fix it. Obviously, an airline can't afford to do this, especially when there are thousands of pilots at all sorts of bases. So what does your chief pilot or safety department use to get the word out when the Acme mishap rate starts to tilt upwards? Sorry if you've already answered this. Thanks for the great show, and Kavu to you, CJ, the C-130 pilot. And yeah, you're right. We can't. And I remember in the Air Force, when safety was a concern, they just say, okay, we're just going to do a safety stand down and we're going to talk about this and come up with ways to prevent this from happening and figure out what's going on. But as you said, you can't do that as an airline. It wouldn't last very long if you did. And we just saw what the United Airlines disruption, their little computer glitch that they had a couple days ago, did to hundreds of thousands of passengers and thousands of flights. And that was just a 2-hour period, I think, or less. So the way that my company does this is through, well, a couple different ways. Printed bulletins that are prepared and put into our what we call V files, or little, like little folders that are hanging in this big area that we walk into in our pilot lounge, and you check that's like essentially our mailbox, and we check for new bulletins and briefing guides and that kind of thing. But that takes time. You have to send this, you have to prepare it and spell check and get people to proofread it and then send it to the printers, and there's a cycle involved there. If it's something urgent, then we have electronic bulletins so every time you sign in on your computer to sign in for a trip or whatever, check your schedule, whatever you're doing on our scheduling system. If it's something that's urgent and needs your attention immediately, it'll just come right up on the screen. The first thing that you see when you sign in, it's going to be right in front of your face, and it's probably going to say, check the safety bulletins, or check the, your fleet bulletins, or your whatever. And we're required to read those. There is also a system that we have that if you've signed up for it, where you will get text messages and even recorded phone messages to your cell phone or whatever phone you've designated as your contact phone number. So if it's something very, very, very urgent, I'm sure that they could send out the message via that method as well. But that's off the top of my head what I can think of as.
And I think it's pretty standard because it kind of works the same way at my airline. If there's something that needs to be gotten out there, safety wise, so they'll put out a bulletin. For us, we don't get printed bulletins because we're going green.
Oh.
But green. But well, I mean, we'll get them in our email boxes, and these are obviously proprietary. I mean, these are things that are basically the company. It's only for the pilots, kind of thing. So
yeah, so that's generally what the way that important information is distributed to the fleet, to the pilots out there. All right, let's keep moving here. Man, I can't believe it's already been an hour and a half on the feedback extravaganza or extra.
Really, an hour and a half? No way.
Yeah. Steve writes in episode 173, you mentioned the video of a cat on the wing of an ultralight airplane. In an effort to prevent this from happening to anyone else, my dog bravely volunteered to model a safety feature all pets should be equipped with. Please see the attached photo. Okay, and so if you're listening to the audio, you will see a photo in the show notes. If you head over to the show notes, you'll see the picture of his dog modeling this very fashionable item. And for those of you who are watching the video, you should be seeing it now. And let's see. Let me get back to the. Come here. Okay, this thing is blocking my access. So, going on with Steve. She was very clearly excited about this project. Not. All she needed was today's newspaper, and she would look like a hostage. Thanks, as always, to you and Rick and Dr. Steph for your great work, and be safe. So this is from Steve M. And to describe it, if you don't want to go and look at the photo in the show notes, his dog. Did he mention his dog's name? No, he didn't. Well, she is modeling this safety feature on her collar, and hanging down from the collar is a red piece of fabric. You've seen them on your airplane probably, and it says "Remove before flight," and it's of course hanging from this poor dog's collar, and she does not look very happy at all for this photo opportunity. But thank you, Steve, for that public service announcement. All right, Anthony, the A320 captain, or not the, there are more than one A320 captains out there, but he's one of them. And he has something he wanted to convey to us via audio feedback.
Oh, hi, Captain Jeff. It's Anthony here from Sydney. Just waiting for my bus to take me from the staff car park around to the terminal before I sign on for my next shift. Just that I was listening to your podcast, and you were talking about the co-pilot you're flying with, who's, you said is a really good pilot. I had an interesting or funny incident yesterday, flying from Sydney up to Cairns. At briefing, the first officer asked me if he could do the sector up to Cairns, because we don't go there very often, and it can be a bit of a challenging sector. So I said, yeah, sure, you can take it up and I'll bring it back. So at the briefing with the flight attendants, we told the flight attendants that he was taking it up and I was going to bring it back. And then when I did the welcome aboard PA to the passengers, I also mentioned that he was flying the aircraft up and he was going to be doing the landing. And that usually means also that the first officer will do the PA prior to arrival and give an update to the passengers of the weather conditions and that sort of information. So that was all going well. Nice flight up to Cairns, and about an hour out we got an update the weather, and the weather started deteriorating. And in fact, it got to the point where it was so bad that, as per our company policy, it got below a certain minima, which is if the cloud base is less than 200 feet above the landing minima, or the visibility is less than 2,000 meters above the landing minima, the captain has to do the landing. So I said, "Oh, sorry, you know, as much as I think you probably do, it's just as good a job as me. I'm required to do it." So I took the sector. I took the landing, flew the ILS. Quite heavy rain. It was dark, and there's no centerline lights, and it's quite dark. It's quite a dark environment around the runway. So you just get the runway lights and the PAPI. And right around the minima, we came out the bottom of the cloud, probably 2,000 meters in rain, and I just didn't want to float. So I got to about 30 feet, started pulling the thrust off, did a half a flare, and banged it on quite a bit harder than I had anticipated. So he taxied in, and I said, "I'm sorry, mate. Everyone thinks that was your landing, but yeah, I think I've ripped you off." And we had a bit of a laugh about that. And he was very good-humoured about it. But to add insult to injury, not only did he have to wear my bad landing, it was my sector home, and he had to go to the walk-around in the driving rain. And he came back in soaking wet, and he was sort of saying, "Oh, man, it's so wet. I had to go into the walk-around, and now I'm soaking wet and all wet through, even though I was wearing a raincoat." And we had a bit of a laugh about that. And not 30 seconds after he come back into the flight deck, the rain stopped, and it would have been a dry walk-around had he waited 2 minutes. So anyway, just thought it was an interesting event. So if he listens to this podcast, I'm really sorry you got ripped off yesterday. But really enjoyed flying with him. He's a good pilot, and the only reason I had to do the landing was just for company policy. And much like your experience, most of the first officers do much better landings than me anyway. All right, nice talking to you. Enjoy your podcast. Stay safe, and I'll look forward to hearing.
Nope, that was it.
That was it.
I don't know why that got cut off like that, but anyway, thank you, Anthony, for sending that in. A funny story regarding. Yeah, it's a shame when something like that happens, and you know, you kind of feel bad. I guess everybody thinks it's you, and it wasn't you, or whatever. Everybody thinks it's him, and whatever. Man, I tell you, when you were describing the situation there with the darkness and the heavy rain and no center line lighting, and this is one of those situations that we sometimes encounter where we go, I wish I was anywhere but here. And that doesn't happen very often, thankfully, in our job. But there are occasions where you wish you could just click your heels together and go, there's no place like home. No.
I want to go back to Kansas.
Yeah, and that's a very challenging, I tell you, one of the most challenging landing situations that I've ever encountered are those situations where you're in heavy rain or approaching heavy rain, because we're not really technically allowed to land in heavy rain. And there's a good reason for that, because it's really hard to see. And then you throw in, lack of light and no center line lights. And oh man, that's.
I'll tell you what, that was now that you mentioned that, I can probably convey a story now. One of the hardest landings that I've ever had to do was on a 767 at an airport in the Ecuadorian coast called Guayaquil. And this particular airport, it's sea level, but the runway is pretty short, and it had no centerline lighting. I don't know if it does anymore, but I don't know if it does now, but it didn't back then. And I remember we broke out at minimums, well, just above minimums, something like 250 feet. And I had the windshield wipers going full strength. And as we broke out of cloud, obviously I saw the runway. It was raining really hard. The windshield wipers were doing their thing. But when I got to about maybe 100 feet, maybe below 100 feet, I was supposed to start doing the flare. There was so much water on the windshield that I could actually, I could still see the runway, but not clearly. And I could see the lights, the runway lights out my left side window and my right side window, and I used that and the radial altimeter to judge or gauge the flare maneuver itself. And it was actually one of the softest landings I've ever done. I didn't mean to land soft, because when it's raining really hard, you're supposed to plant it a little harder to break through that surface tension and stop the airplane, as quickly as possible. Right. But it came out so softly, and I was like, man. And the crazy thing was that once we got to maybe 3/4 of the way down the runway, the rain just practically stopped. Yeah, and we're able to taxi it off the runway and parked it, no problem.
It's all about timing, isn't it?
Oh man, but just raining and the windshield wipers, they try to, but sometimes they try to work, but sometimes all they do is just scare you, because it's just, there's no way they can keep up with all that rain.
And it depends on which way the wind is blowing too. And so you're, in the cockpit sitting just a couple feet away from each other, and your windscreen is, both windshield wipers are going full blast, and what you're seeing is like nothing, and the guy sitting to your right may have no problem seeing anything, and so you hope that the person that can see everything is the one that's actually the pilot flying the airplane, because you don't want to be doing transfer aircraft control, when you're getting close to that flare part of your landing. But man, I tell you, it's the couple of times where I thought, wow, that was like pretty close. It was usually involving very heavy rainfall. All right. Let's see. I was going to play this. I'm not sure what this sounds like. Oh,
nice
disco. Kind of brings me back to the 70s.
Don't get me started on that, please.
My rum and cokes. Okay, I was legal. Barely. All right. Derek writes, I saw a cockpit view video on YouTube of a 777 approach and landing on 26 right in Atlanta. By the way, it was an Acme flight, and it's still out there on YouTube. I hope nobody investigates this. Anyway, it appeared that there was a thick black rubber covering the full length of the runway, much more than I have ever normally seen. I thought that airports periodically removed this, but I'm sure it's not time efficient nor cheap. Is there a point where this would make operations unsafe, particularly if wet? And then he sent a link to the YouTube video. And so I watched the video and thought, well, that looks pretty normal to me. And, when you're flying in and out of these very, very busy airports, international airports, you get a lot of traffic. And every time you land, you're adding your rubber deposit. Some of us adding more than others to the runway surface. And what's that really kind of unusual? You'd think that all the rubber deposits would be in the touchdown zone, but usually it's extending all the way through the center of the runway and then into the touchdown zone at the opposite end.
Oh yeah, and usually not only there, but on runways that have the high-speed taxiway off the runway, you get some there as well. So
yeah, I see some crazy things. Sometimes you're going into position and you see these the tire tracks or like black lines that are kind of going like swerving off the runway. You're thinking, wow, I wonder what happened there. Glad that wasn't. But so yeah, it's not good to have these rubber deposits on the runway because it decreases the efficiency of the of water dispersal. Most of these runways or a lot of them are grooved runways where they actually cut grooves into the concrete and to help channel the water away. And but you lay down all this rubber deposits. And that kind of clogs up those channels, and you end up getting a situation where if you get a lot of rain, then you have hydroplaning. We were just talking about hydroplaning. And so periodically, airport authorities have to shut down runways to get rid of the rubber deposits that have been building. I'm not sure how often they do it, but it does get to the point at some point where they have to go out there and use machines to completely remove all those rubber deposits.
It's interesting because in some runways, and particularly in Latin America, they're not concrete colored; they're more pavement colored. So they're a darker color.
Oh, so you can't see the black deposit.
So you can't see the black deposit. You kind of guesstimate where the rubber deposit would be. So if it's rainy outside, and I think I'm pretty sure I talked about this in an episode a long time ago, how I was coming in to land one day, and then I just so happened to land right after that rubber deposit, but I didn't take into account there was going to be another one just past that. And as I put the reversers in, one reverser kicked in before the other one, and I started feeling the airplane swerving one way and then the other, and I actually had to use differential braking and differential thrust reverser application to get the airplane going straight down the runway. And by the time we parked the airplane, I was like, well, let's not do that again.
Yeehaw.
Yeah. So and just like Captain Jeff said, a lot of times these airports, these runways will get NOTAMed off, there'll be a NOTAM a notice to airmen published letting you know that the airport is going to be closed, and particularly if it's a single runway airport, you got to be careful not to, arrive when the runway's closed. And I'm saying that because it's happened. I've seen cases where people actually get dispatched and they haven't gone through the NOTAMs as thoroughly as they should, and then they're about to, they're maybe 3/4 of the way down to the flight to the airport, and they're like, wait, the airport's closed. So it's like, Another interesting thing is, if you want to know how fast you have to go for you to actually start hydroplaning, you take your tire pressure, you take the square root of that, and you multiply that times 9, and that's going to give you the approximate speed at which you would start hydroplaning. So.
That's one of those things. One of those formulas that I never forget. 9
really?
Square root of the tire pressure. I don't know why that just sticks in my head. It's like I guess you to remember.
Yeah.
But good point. Good question. Nev in the UK sent a very good article, a viewpoint that was published in aerospaceamerica.org, I believe. Let me scroll down here and make sure I get this right. Aerospace America, magazine by the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. And it is titled Airbus versus Boeing, whose automation philosophy is the best. And this is a viewpoint by Clint R. Balog. And he talks about the different approaches that Boeing and Airbus take as far as their philosophy for automation. And let's see, I'm just trying to get some of these pull quotes here. The Boeing pull quote is, Boeing flight decks are designed to provide automation to assist but not replace the flight crew member responsible for safe operation of the airplane. And then the Airbus philosophy, again, according to this guy, all aircraft have physical limits that they must not exceed. These limits define the flight envelope, not to be exceeded during normal operation. So it's a really good article regarding the different approaches to automation and the human interface, and which one is best. And according to Clint, well, I'm not going to tell you which one he decided was the best approach. They're different. I'm not sure you could objectively say one or the other is better than the other. They're just different, and you have to understand. Which is, by the way, one of those things that I mentioned this in part 1 of the episode 175, when Dr. Steph and I were doing the news section, now I've lost my train of thought all of a sudden. I was talking about the latest episode of the plane safety podcast that our friend Pilot Pip does, and he interviewed Captain Al in the UK, and he is an Airbus A321 currently captain, and he's flown many Airbus models. And the point he was making is that all these airplanes are airplanes. The bottom line, they're airplanes, and you just have to understand what the automation philosophy is, and you have to completely understand what the airplane is doing, and you can run a safe operation, whether it be a Boeing or an Airbus or a McDonnell Douglas or whatever, as long as you understand, how the automation is working, and so it's not a surprise to you when it stops. So he said it much more eloquently than I just did, and if you're interested in how much so more eloquently, head over to Plane Safety Podcast, episode 15, I believe. Very, very interesting show.
But that's just what you said is very true. An airplane's an airplane, and any airplane's going to fly like an airplane. You have to remember that when we learned how to fly, we didn't have fancy autopilots or fancy flight directors and fly-by-wire and this and that. We learned to fly on just basically lawnmowers with wings, and those are, those require that you fly the airplane as basically as you can. And that's how any airplane, when you strip down all the automation and all the fancy stuff, it goes back to being just that, a lawnmower with wings. So fly like it.
So that's what we're doing? We're flying lawnmowers with wings?
It's funny because that's what my flight instructor used to say that. It was used to say at a Cessna 152 because I learned to fly in a 152. He said it's just a lawnmower with wings, and I never forgot that.
All right. Well, with that, I think it's time to move on to this. Scott Richardson. I don't know if he's still there. I noticed that earlier he was in the live audience while we were recording this feedback extravaganza.
There you go. You should do like an echo thing there.
I probably won't because it will take too much energy for me to do that. Anyway, he sent some feedback. Let's listen to him.
Hello, Captain Jeff. This is Scott Richardson from Greenfield, Indiana, just outside of Indianapolis. And I'm sitting here drinking a Dirt Wolf double IPA and listening to APG 173 and your story about the ACARS hack. I'd like to let you know that it is very easily possible for people on the ground to be able to receive and decode the ACARS messages. In fact, I've done this in the past. There is software available for Windows machines that can actually decode the packets. So if you have a scanner and an antenna that you can tune to the correct ACARS frequency and connect the scanner's audio output into the sound card of your PC, the software will listen to that and decode the ACARS data that's being sent from the aircraft down to the ground. And I also assume that if you're close enough to a ground station, you'd be able to hear the transmissions from ground to air, but I'm not that close, so I've never been able to do that. But it's quite interesting to read some of the messages that come down, requests for assistance at the gate, medical issues and flight emergencies and so on. And I also know that you transmit down aircraft performance parameters, engine performance, and that kind of thing. So it's very easily done and somewhat entertaining, although I haven't done it for a while. So I thought I would pass that on to the rest of the APG community. Also, on a personal note, I begin my flight training this Friday for my sport pilot's license for powered parachute. So I'm excited. I'm going to be a low and slower just over the treetops, kind of the opposite of what you do, but I'm really looking forward to it. And I'll keep you informed as I go along in my training. And I'm hoping I'll be able to take a GoPro up and post some video to my website as well. So thank you very much for all you do, Captain Jeff. Tailwinds, clear skies, long runways, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, thank you, Scott. I hope, let's see, did he include his, no, he didn't include his website address in his feedback. Way to go, Scott. If you're still there and you're listening.
No, he's there. He's on the chat. Actually, I told him we were playing his feedback, and I'm going to tell him to give us his website.
Yeah, but give us your website. So if you got some GoPro footage from your slice of aviation, it's all flying. And in fact, a lot of people would argue that what you are going to start doing and training, which is about a week ago, I think. You said this Friday, so I'm assuming that meant a week ago from today that you started your training, and you'll have to let us know how that's going. And also, if you did take some video, let us know how we can watch it, because that would be a lot of fun. I know I'd be interested in seeing it. And I'm sure the community would as well. And this thing about ACARS, I knew that ACARS communications were not encrypted, but I had no idea that you could. I just did a search on Google for ACARS decoders or ACARS whatever, and just all kinds of things popped up, and I'm thinking, what? I had no idea you could get like this one I'm looking at right here that I clipped for the show. The company is AirNav ACARS decoder, and it's by far the world's most successful ACARS decoder currently available. With years of experience, AirNav Systems developed a product with extreme performance. Almost no messages received are lost. Stop using expensive and complex ACARS decoders that require hardware. So this, you don't even need hardware. All you need is this software, an internet connection, and a source of ACARS messages, and then it has a screenshot of some of these communications that these airplanes are having with their companies. I'm thinking, wow, I had no idea that people could actually be eavesdropping into the messages that I'm sending and receiving via my ACARS unit in the airplane that I fly.
I had no idea either. Wow.
I mean, I knew that there was Flight Radar 24 and all these different things out there where you could see our little radar blip and our data tag and all that kind of stuff. And I knew that if you had a scanner, you could listen to our frequencies and everything else, I guess it just makes sense that, why not? Why not just see everything that's going on? Let's see. Steph is saying that she's going to be home for a few minutes. So I'm going to send her the link that I sent to you, and maybe she can join us for a few minutes. Let's see. Sent mail. So Scott, you said Scott's still there. Did he give us his link to his website?
He goes, damn window won't let me post website.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, tell you what, Scott, send it to feedback@airlinepilotguy.com, and on the next episode, we will put that out there to the community. So let's see here. I'm going to forward this to Dr. Steph. Fascinating radio here.
Oh, yeah. Good stuff.
And there you go. So if, let's see, if you could, here, I'll tell her, check your email. And then maybe she can join us. Check email. There we go. All right. And so in the meantime, I tell you what, doing this show, I have learned so many things about aviation that I had no idea about. And this is one of those, you can actually tap into our ACARS communications.
Wow.
Okay.
That's amazing.
Let's play a little, let's try this one, see what this is.
I like that one.
Yeah, I like that too. It's called Standing Here. These go on for a while. It's like a 2.5 minute long version. I'm not going to play the whole thing for everybody. Okay, Dan writes, I'm an ex-Eastern Airlines employee. I worked in ramp service. So I guess that you could call this feedback from the view of my side of the fuselage. And Airline Pilot Guy 171, you and Rick were explaining how the thrust reversers work on your aircraft. In the 80s, Eastern initiated a controversial procedure called the powerback. This was a cost-saving, he puts in quotes, measure where the flight crew would use the thrust reversers to power back from the gate, eliminating the need for a pushback crew, and was performed by ramp service instead of aircraft mechanics. This was done only on narrow-body aircraft. At the time, I remember thinking that this can't be good for the engines. I was working in ATL at the time, and I don't recall ever seeing Acme use this procedure. You're correct, sir. We never did. So my question is, have you ever in your career flying 727s and the Mad Dog ever used thrust reverse to actually back the airplane up rather than just slowing it down? Maybe in a taxi situation or at the gate. I would ask the same question of Rick, but I think those monstrous engines on the 777 would suck up the pavement. Never miss a podcast and am a Patreon supporter. Thank you, Dan, for being a Patreon supporter. I do appreciate that. I really miss the airline business. A part of me died when Eastern went away. Yeah, that's always sad to see great airlines, big legacy airlines like Eastern and Pan Am and TWA just disappear. Thank you for your work at the airline. And I remember when I was new at Acme in the late 80s, and I thought even into maybe the early 90s, but I'm not sure exactly when they stopped doing it, but watching Eastern power back from the gate using thrust reverse, and I'm thinking, gosh darn, I'm glad we don't do that, because that just kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies just seeing that. You can't see anything behind you. You're relying completely on the marshalers on the ramp, and so we never did that. And I don't.
How's it go? Keep going till it sounds expensive.
Yeah, exactly. Keep going until it sounds expensive. And I just I've told this many times on this show, but just in case you've missed it, my weakness in driving cars, and every time I've had an accident where I've bent metal, and it's been my fault, has been a situation when the car was not moving forward, it was moving backwards. And I guess I don't clear very well when I'm backing up. And So my wife, knowing that, asked me when I was early on in my career flying for the airline. She said, "Honey, they don't. You don't back up the airplanes, do you?" No. Oh, good, because she knew that that was not something I was very good at. So we have not used that technique. We're not authorized to do that. And the one time I do remember doing it at Acme was we were trying to back out from the gate at Boise. It was snowy. The tug was not getting any traction at all, and it just needed that extra little bit of assistance to help back out from the gate. And so we just popped in the reverse a little bit, and that was enough to allow the tug to get enough traction to continue to push us out. But that is something. I was not a captain at the time, and I deny any knowledge of what I just said.
Good.
Now that I think about it, I probably was dreaming that. I don't think that really actually happened.
Yeah, I think it was a dream, actually. Yeah.
So let's see. I need to get my dream thing in there. Oh yeah, now I remember. That was a dream. Okay. Mechanic. Oh, and he just assumed that you've never done that with the 777. Is it correct, sir?
Yes, we haven't done that with the 777. The engines are like the diameter of each engine is the same diameter as a 737's fuselage. So it's a pretty big engine. You wouldn't suck up the pavement, but anything that's not tied down would probably go in there, and that would be very, very expensive. One thing. The other thing is that engine moves so much air, and since you're not moving forward, it's very probable that you might get a compressor stall, and that's not good for the engine either.
No.
That would be, also very, very expensive.
Hey, Masha makes a good point in the chat room that why not just get some rear view mirrors? Well, they kind of cause a drag, but you know what? Actually, seriously, many airplanes now, like the Airbus A380 and some of the Boeings, et cetera, I guess maybe those are options or whatever. They have cameras like these. Technology has gotten to this point where digital cameras are not that expensive and are easy to mount almost anywhere. And so I guess, you could have some cameras pointed at, I mean, cars, darn it, come with these modern cars come with little cameras pointed backwards that kind of show you where the car is going to go. And everything turns red, when you're approaching an object. It's getting pretty fancy out there. So I guess they could have the same technology applied to airplanes, but let's just not do that. Let's just do the old tug connected with the tow bar and let them push the airplane backwards. That's my preference anyway.
You know what? I agree with you 100%. Absolutely.
Excellent. Mechanic Bob sent some feedback. Let's listen to him. Come on, Bob.
Hi, Captain Jeff. Mechanic Bob here. I wanted to leave you some feedback to help answer a couple of questions. First one was you had a question about how accurate the aircraft fuel gauges are. In the smaller airplanes I fly in, I'd never trust the fuel gauges, or so I've been trained, and my experience also helps validate that. And usually we use a dipstick to measure the fuel before each flight. In small aircraft, they use a float type system to measure the fuel level, and they're pretty notoriously inaccurate. On the light jets that I work on the other hand, the gauges are really pretty accurate. They're a totally different system. They use capacitance types probes. Each fuel tank has multiple fuel probes that connect to a fuel totalizer. And these gauges are actually accurate enough to where our pilots will actually use them for their pre-flight to see if they have enough fuel to complete their flight, which I would never do in a 172. In my line service days, we actually use the aircraft fuel gauges to calculate how much fuel we were removing from an aircraft, because when you start pulling the fuel off, sucking the fuel off the airplane with the fuel truck, and it turns the fuel meter, you can't really rely on it for accuracy, because as you're sucking fuel out of the airplane, once it starts to empty out, you're also sucking air through it, and that'll give you inaccurate readings. And of course, fuel is money, so if it wasn't pretty accurate, then I don't think we would be using that method. Another item I wanted to leave you feedback on is there was a question about how you would simulate partial panel on a Garmin G1000 aircraft. And I do fly one airplane that's equipped with the G1000. I did about a third of my instrument training in it. I attached a link from the FAA website that explains how you can simulate different failures. These methods include pulling circuit breakers or dimming the PFD so you can't see it, and then you would move your flight instruments over to the MFD by switching it to reversionary. Some flight schools, mine included, are not very keen on pulling circuit breakers in flight, so you can also purchase little sticky covers to block out parts of the PFD to simulate a failure that way. And basically the little stickies look like the PFD would look like when you have a red X across part of the display, just like you would if that part actually failed. And then I also had some APG trivia. What is a civilian light twin jet aircraft that does not have any ailerons? I'll give you one hint, and that is that this specific model has been discussed previously on the APG show. I'll send you the answer in my next feedback. As always, thanks for the show, and keep up the good work.
Okay, a light twin jet that does not use ailerons but only spoilers. Is that what his question was?
That's what I gathered.
I know that they're the Mitsubishi MU2, but it's not a jet; it's a turboprop.
It's turboprop. I don't know. Well, I have the same question for him, but in a transport category airplane. What's one airplane out there that is a transport category jet? It's a twin that doesn't have any ailerons. Ooh.
Transport category twin, no ailerons.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. Any guesses, Dr. Steph? Dr. Steph has joined us.
Yay.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, Dr. Steph.
I went to work, and you guys were doing a show, and I got off work. You were still doing a show. I listened to it the entire way home, and you're still going.
I know. It's like I just realized that I haven't eaten anything since breakfast.
Oh, jeez.
So I think that we're going to call it quits very shortly.
I just had to make my my cameo appearance, that's all. But no, I actually don't know the answer to either of those questions. So.
The transport category airplane is the Airbus 310. It had no ailerons. It only had roll spoilers. Yep.
Really?
Huh.
And Acme actually had a couple of 310s.
Yeah, we did. We got them with the purchase of the part of Pan Am. Those airplanes and the pilots associated with them became part of what we like to call Acme Airlines back in the, was it the 90s, I think?
That was 91, I believe, that Pan Am ceased operations.
Yeah,
90,
wow, I
91.
can't believe it's been that long.
Time flies.
That's what she said.
That's what she said.
All right. Travis in the chat room says, hello again, nice mustache. Thank you. Or is it Kravis? Crosidia? I don't know. Seriously, though, what brand of glasses are you? These are actually, I don't know if you've heard of Zenny Optical, but they're like really, really inexpensive optics and frames. And
Didn't I tell you those look nice on you?
You did. You did. Although my family doesn't like them. They say that they're too big.
They were your recommendation, Rick?
What's that?
The glasses?
Yeah, they were my recommendation.
Nice.
Oh, okay. So I don't know. I guess we're just gonna have to wait for Mechanic Bob to send more feedback and tell us what the answer is to the light twin jet that only uses spoilers for roll control, not ailerons. Thank you, Mechanic Bob, for your information regarding fuel gauges and also simulated partial panel in the G1000. And in the show notes that Dr. Steph and Miami Rick have access to, there's a picture of the page from Sporty's that show the little plastic things that you can set on the panel, and they have like big red X's on them. So
Right. That's what I was thinking about in the episode when we talked about that. Were those stickers?
they're only $19.95 from Sporties, and use code. No, I'm sorry, I don't have an affiliate code with Sporties, but anyway, tell them Jeff sent you, or all of us at APG sent you. You know what? We have made quite the dent on the feedback. We haven't caught completely up, believe it or not. But I think that we've done a pretty good job. Let me do.
We have to save some for the next episode.
Well, believe me.
We're gonna have another 3-hour episode, another 5-hour episode.
Trust me, there will be plenty, I tell you, for the next episode. I'm going to jump over to Ivan. His feedback, some audio feedback regarding something that we talked about recently, the Mayo Clinic helicopter that started up at the air show.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Hello, Captain Jeff. Yvonne Cruz from sunny Hawaii. Leaving you a little bit of feedback here on SpeakPipe, so I'm going to try to make it very quick and to the point, and that is with regards to the startup of the Mayo Clinic EC-145 helicopter. I did a little bit of digging, and I found out that in order to start that aircraft is a fairly simple steps that you need to take in order to start the aircraft, which would be battery switch on. I believe they're called primary fuel pumps. Don't quote me on that. Primary fuel pump switch is on, and then the idle switch, or excuse me, I believe would be a start switch, but I think what it's called is idle switch. Idle switch to idle, and after that, the FADEC, full authority digital engine control startup sequence happens all on its own, as it is a single pilot medevac type aircraft. So simple and to the point. So just to clarify a little bit, helicopters are just like airplanes. Some take a lot longer, like mine, which take about 40 to 45 minutes to get going, or as simple as just pressing a couple of buttons at the same time, manually rolling a throttle open, and you're starting the helicopter, and it's as simple as that as well. But maybe next time they should disconnect the battery, and that'll prevent them from having that type of situation happen at an air show. Anyways, that was just a very quick bit of feedback on helicopter stuff, and appreciate what you do, and looking forward to your next podcast. Take care. Bye-bye.
Now, did he just say it takes 40 to 45 minutes to get his started?
That's
wow.
What he said. Yeah.
That's what I heard. Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking, Ivan, are you? I bet he is like a Coast Guard guy or something like that. In those big giant, those behemoth helicopters. Maybe that's what he's talking about. Still, that seems like a long time to. Please elaborate, Ivan.
Yeah. Send more feedback.
Yeah, more feedback. That piqued our interest.
I know he's a military guy. He's a military guy because in his picture from Twitter, he's you can tell he is. He's got the look.
That those stunningly handsome military looks. Look. Okay. Let's see. That's what she said. Yeah, I'm just kind of scrolling through and seeing what we could just quickly do before we go. You know, it's been more than 2 hours now on our feedback extravaganza. I'm too cheap to do a real sound effect.
I keep telling me you should.
And okay, yeah, okay, one more. Hans Petter, HP, we'll call him. Songs about flying. He's been listening to the podcast for a long time now and learned a lot. Never had anyone tell me about the difference between flight level, 1013.25 hectopascals. Is that right? Did I say that right?
Hectopascal. Yep.
And actual altitude measured in feet. And if it weren't for Airline Pilot Guy, I still wouldn't have known. And I could go on. But in episode 161, songs about flying came up, exemplified by the beautiful Learning to Fly by Pink Floyd. When I was 14, I heard Iron Maiden's song, Aces High, for the first time. The story is about military flying, but nevertheless, it's a great song. And he put a link to the YouTube video. I think I had that set up, so let's see if it still is. We can listen to a little bit of this. Okay, I think I have the volume on. Aces High.
We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France.
This is the video, and they're showing some footage from World War II, I believe. Yep. And I'm gonna fast forward here.
That's Sir Winston Churchill.
Yeah, Sir Winston Churchill. Thank you. I'll just play that much of it so that I don't get in trouble. So that Iron Maiden Aces High. So thank you, HP, for sending that feedback regarding flying songs. He said, I'm not completely up to date on the episodes. 161 was the latest one I heard, so Aces High might have been mentioned without me hearing it. No, I don't think anybody did mention that one. So
Nope.
Hans Petter is from Norway, so thank you, sir, for that. And with that, I think it's time to finally call it quits. And I think that you all have heard way more of Miami Rick and I, and possibly Dr. Steph, than you had bargained for. No, you haven't.
No, I kept myself to a minimum in
Yeah,
these
you
two
did.
episodes.
You did. So, but this was helpful for me to kind of slog through. I don't know if that's a word or not. Slog through, I guess. This incredible amount of feedback, and that we're getting closer to feedback inbox 0, which is good.
See, the good thing is that, like you said, it's getting to a manageable level now. You know, it's not. It's good now.
Yeah, if no one sends in anything between now and whenever you record again next week, you could get through everything in one show, maybe.
Yeah, so don't send me any more feedback.
This is your cue. Send everything you've been waiting to send. No.
Now I'm going to just be deluged in feedback. But anyway, so yeah, that's. I'm trying to get back to the screen so I can see you guys on the Hangout. There you are. Okay, now I see you. All right. So anything that you guys would like to say before we end the feedback extravaganza or extra?
You go, Dr. Steph.
Oh, I don't really have much to add. I just wanted to stop by and say hi. So thanks for having me for like 5 minutes. But you know.
Yeah.
It's not the same without you. No, guys, thank you so much for all that feedback. Like I always say, you guys are what make the show happen. So if you guys don't send your questions in, then we do have a show, but it wouldn't be as good a show. So we really appreciate all that stuff.
Exactly. And what, in a couple weeks you're going to be up there in at AirVenture?
Oh yeah, so this is the deal. I'm looking at heading up there on the 21st or 22nd. I am coordinating the whole thing with Tyler Herrick. Fred was looking at going up there as well, so that would make 3 of us. And it's going to be kind of interesting because all the hotels are booked. Everything is kind of, we're doing it kind of last minute, so we're going to have to rough it a little bit. So we're talking about maybe doing some camping up there. And but I don't know. It's going to be a good time. It's going to be fun. There's going to be beer. There's going to be airplanes. There's going to be APGers. And we're looking at having a great time up there. So I hope that we get to meet you guys up there. I'll be the guy wearing the Acme shirt and chewing gum, so look for me. And yeah, just make sure you come out and say hi.
Wearing the Acme shirt and chewing gum. Okay.
There you go.
For that guy.
Can't mistake him.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay. I guess that's it. So hopefully sometime next week, one or more of us will be recording episode 176 and, talking more about the news and, of course, your great feedback. So until then, I hope that you all have a great weekend, a great week, and wishing you clear skies, unlimited visibility, and tailwinds. Take care, and God bless.
Woohoo! Bye, guys.
Yay.
That was awesome. Oh,
all right.
Man.
Wow, that was...
So did you split that up into 2 shows? Are you putting them out as 2 separate shows, or was that just like
Yeah,
one
that was,
long, gigantic marathon?
No, I think we went about... Because you and I, Steph, I think we kind of could distill that down to about 48 minutes.
Yeah, it wasn't terribly long.
And then the video was longer, but I
Mhm.
think. But I'm not sure about the audio, but I think it's around 48 minutes. And then on part 2, when Rick and I were doing feedback, I kept looking down going, okay, now we're adding this to what you and I did, Dr. Smith, is going to be like close to 3 hours, maybe more.
Yeah.
And then I thought, why don't we just keep on going? But then we'll just like split it,
Right.
and then do a feedback extra. And we did more than 2 hours of feedback extra.
Wow.
And we still didn't catch up.
No.
It's a lot of feedback.
But I'm glad we did. I'm really glad we did this because it needed to be done.
Right. I mean, it was getting to the point where it's like stuff was so old. You're like, well, even some of
It's
it
like
time
on December
sensitive.
17th, 1903,
Right. Exactly.
this new thing came out. What is this?
Yeah, that's a slight exaggeration.
What, did it happen in North Carolina?
Yes, it did. So who's the first in flight? Let's not have that argument. Not on my show. All you Daytonites and North Carolinians.
North Carolinians, all the way.
Carolinians.
Yeah. Well, I live in South Carolina now, so I don't know. I don't know where I'm from anymore.
Is that right? You're technically in South Carolina. Huh?
Yeah, I'm like a mile and a half from the border with North Carolina.
What's
so if you drive,
your city?
it's called Tega Cay.
Tega K?
Tega Cay, 2 words.
Tega K. Okay. Sounds like
Tegacay. It sounds like I live in Hawaii because.
or like down in the Florida.
Yeah.
It sounds like something that you'd have down here by the Keys or something.
Exactly. I gotta go pay a guy who cut down a dead tree next to my dock the other day while I wasn't home. He's here in my driveway right now.
Go.
He deserves it. All right. See ya.
Bye, guys.
Later.
Talk to you later.
So
Bye.
back to the page where we have all this stuff going on. There we go. Beers and Planes, Sarah Spencer, Masha, Neville. Oh, look. Just tuned in for the last 30 minutes. Okay, great, Neville. Again, man, I'm really sorry that we weren't able to meet up in Orlando, but obviously understandable based on what was going on with my personal life. But hope to do it again soon. And so, yeah. Well, thanks everybody for hanging out with us live. And for those of you watching the rerun, I hope it wasn't too long. And what else? Anything else, Rick?
No, thank you guys for hanging out. It was this was fun. This was a lot of fun. We've been at it for over 5 hours.
I know.
And
it
was a good time. It was a great time to do it. Yep.
My wife came down here at some point, and she's looking. She didn't realize that I had kind of moved to this place in the basement, and she's looking at everything that I've done, just shaking her head. What the heck are you doing here? And I said, don't worry, I'll get it back to normal eventually.
Well, mine came by. Mine came by and got me some ice cream and some beer.
Ooh, nice. Ice cream and beer. What a great combination.
Who did, your wife?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that was nice of her.
That's nice.
That was a picture of your wife you posted to Twitter the other day, correct? You called her the
that's
boss,
right.
and I was just.
She's like.
I was like, I'll be putting my foot in my mouth here if it's not really your wife or something.
No, that is her. She's like, people don't know what I look like. I'm like, well, why do you want people to know what you look like? Cause she's like, and then she's like, because it's just right. People need to know what your wife looks like. I'm like, all right, so I'll put your picture on here. She's like, okay.
I saw that.
See, now Justice is he's like, I don't think he wants anyone to know who he is, what he looks like. So there may never ever be pictures of You can find those ones on Facebook, but I don't think they'll be.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think I've met him, but for some reason, I think I saw some of your pictures when you guys were in India.
Yes, he's the Chinese guy. Yeah.
The Chinese guy in India.
In India, yeah.
Okay.
And I was the white chick, so.
So if I do Miami_Rick, Twitter.com, Miami Rick, and maybe how much of your.
Oh, you have to go back a ways now because he's posted
back a ways.
Gosh. You're a monster.
Prolific Twitterer.
Okay, I remember seeing the one where the guy kind of overshot the runway and landed the Mad Dog in a mall or something like that.
Yeah, what was that? That's a mall? Rick?
What's that?
That picture with the Mad Dog in the mall? That's a mall?
No. That's it's one of those. It's called Fantasyland, which basically is, it's little kids go there and they pretend to be firefighters or pilots or or air traffic controllers or boat captains and stuff like that. So it's they have a bunch of
cool,
like little pretend.
It's like a museum kind of
scenarios, yeah, and it's in this park in the north part of Santiago, which is kind of where we stay. Really nice place, and that's actually across the street from the. You see the buildings, the gray buildings back there. Those are actually the headquarters for the airline.
So this one on July 2nd, it says many years and many more pounds ago when I used to drive 767s with my left arm out the window.
No, that's not her. That's not her.
Okay, well, which one?
It was just a picture of her. It's like
it was just a picture of her. Is it? It's
so we really don't know that that's actually your wife because you're not with her in the.
I'm not with her. Hang on. Let me show you a picture of me with her. Hang on a minute.
Okay.
I don't see it. I think you're making all this up.
No, it was on there. Hang on a minute. Let me put it on here.
It must have been longer ago than that. I saw your little niece, I think, right?
Yeah, my little niece is on there.
Was it before that? Your dad's birthday party? I don't think so.
Should be around there. Hang on.
Huh.
Photos, albums.
Oh, well.
Photos.
Oh, well.
Oh, yeah, it's photos, our family.
Well, I need to get this 175 edited and out. The good thing is I don't have to mess with the video much. The bad part is that I got to do the audio and the post. I like it.
Well, it is 5 hours of audio that we did, so.
Yeah. It is. It is what it is.
I mean, really, I was so amazed because I thought I had this horrible afternoon where, like, you know, just like nothing went right. I was working with an X-ray tech I've never worked with before, and she didn't know how to set things up properly for the procedures we're doing, and it just took like an hour and a half longer than it should have for everything to happen this afternoon. And I was like, oh, they're still going.
Yep, we are. You're going, God, these guys just don't quit.
I know.
Sarah Spencer says, Jeff and Rick on an A380. Who's the captain and who's the first officer? Well, if we're going to go on seniority, I'll be the captain and Rick will be the first officer. Right?
Rick?
There? Hello?
Rick?
Does this work?
Do you still hear me?
I hear you, yeah.
Oh, okay. Rick is frozen in time there in his picture.
You know what it is? It's probably overtaxing his processor trying to find this.
Trying to find the picture.
Yeah, so because I have been flying since, well, I guess
probably before both of us were born, or right around.
When were you born?
1982.
Oh yeah, I started flying before you were born.
And Rick is only a year older than me.
I flew a couple times in the mid-late 70s, and then really technically didn't seriously start flying until 1982, 81, when I was in the Air Force.
So you were in the Air Force before I was born?
Yeah, I was in officer training school, started in September of 1981, graduated from Auburn in 1981, August, and in September I started OTS. And then I started pilot, and then I was in that flight screening program, so I got a little time. And then he said his video was cut because of authentication issues.
What?
Yeah, something happened like this earlier.
Oh, really?
He was gone, and then he had to rejoin us.
Huh.
And then I started pilot training in 1982, January or February of 82.
And I was born in May.
What happened there?
I don't know. Where'd you go?
I keep getting kicked off the call, man. It's the second time.
Not me. I'm not kicking you off.
Really? You're like, I wouldn't enough for Rick. All right, go away.
I think it was that Miami Mike guy.
Yeah, he's
trying to hog the
causing troubles again.
Line. Well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to go ahead and stop the broadcast of the Hangout.
Okay.
And so again, thank you all in the live YouTube on the YouTube page where we're broadcasting live. Thanks for joining us today, and good luck listening to all of that we recorded today.
It'll sound nice and polished, though, in episode format, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure it won't. I'm absolutely positive it will not. But anyway, look forward to doing this again. Not this long, but doing something like this again next week.
Yeah, I like the Hangouts.
I do. It's nice being able to see each other, and yeah, I like the format, and I think the audio was as good or just as good as Skype.
It sounded a little better than Skype. I mean, it doesn't seem to cut out quite as much or get that lag or latency.
Right. So, Antoine, you rock.
Thanks, Antoine.
No, if we see you again, you have to bring that beer. Not the same beer. I'm hoping that you drank whatever you brought over for me from that brewery near you. Anywho. All right. Well, okay, here we go. I'm going to stop the broadcast.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.